And we are live in the fast lane. This is Life in the Fast Lane, how ad-supported streaming is changing television. Thank you for attending this pre-MIPCOM session. For those who don't know, a week from today in Cannes, the first MIPCOM event in person in 3 years. And I think all the panelists that I have with me will be there. So again, this is really a great opportunity to learn from some of the key players in the FAST space. For those who don't know, FAST is free ad-supported streaming television, and we're going to get started here. But first, big thanks to Janet Greco, who's the executive producer of Media Meet and Greet, which is on the Deal Room platform. And if you had to register, which you did, of course, you'll know that there are lots of people who are registered here for you to meet with. So whether you want to meet at any time through the rest of the year and beyond, if you want to set up meetings with people at MIPCOM or do video chats, you can do that here. But I am really pleased to have such an all-star panel. With me today are Jonathan French, Senior Vice President of Sales and Business Development with MuxIP. Jonathan joined us from London. Hello, Jonathan.
Hello, everybody.
Yes. And I don't know where he is on your screen, but he's in New York actually today, and that's Larry Baird, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of Crackle Plus, which is a chicken soup for the soul entertainment company. Welcome to you, Larry.
Thank you very much. I'm going to have to downgrade my title just a little bit, VP of Marketing for Crackle Plus.
All right, well, that's okay. You know, you're always a chief in my mind. You're always a chief in my mind. You're not a follower. Richard Young joins us from London as well. He's the director of syndication with Little Dot Studios. Welcome, Richard. And good to see you. Yes, yes. I think the ether is taking some time to move those bits. But last but not least, of course, is John Wells. He's the CEO of Dooya Media Group. He joins us from Los Angeles. Hello, John.
Thank you for having me.
Great.
Being here.
It's great that you're all here. So one thing I will mention before we dive into the conversation is that you should stay right here at noon Eastern time, because it's now 11:01. At noon, Natalie Lethbridge, who's the CEO of Atonic Digital, is hosting a live interactive conversation with Tom Link. He's the CEO of MuxIP, and that starts at noon. And then one other thing, which I put in the chat so you can check it out. We are co-promoting a big event that's next Wednesday at MIPCOM. That is the Get Ready to Go Fast workshop series. That's produced by Global Media Consult. It's part of the official MIPCOM program. That is Wednesday, October 19th. And that's at 10:45 to 11:30 a.m. Central European time. That's in the Verrières Grand Auditorium in the Palais des Festivals in Cannes. And it's 6 tables with different topics. Actually, table 6 is our very own Janet Greco, who's hosting a conversation with Tom Link on the issues of rolling your own fast TV channels, the technical and practical challenges therein. But you can check what I put in the chat and learn more about it, and we'll talk. We'll have another little promo at the end. But let's dive in right now. You know, one of the recent trends, Jonathan, that we've seen in the migration of broadcast channels to fast is this transition from serial digital interface, or SDI, to IP, or Internet Protocol. You know, there's this big transition of creating fast channels to support a broadcast brand. So how do you guys play in this arena?
Well, over the past 2 years, we've been working with a company you might know called Globecast, who's a satellite facilities company who have, you know, an enormous portfolio of traditional broadcast channels who are looking to go OTT. And in the background, we've been facilitating taking these traditional SDI broadcasters with you know, DTMF tones for ad markers, and basically engineering a solution to convert those to an OTT stream where we basically duplicate where the ad markers had been, creating new, you know, cue points, or whatever you want to call them, SCUDdy markers, and then delivering those to wherever the broadcaster wants to deliver to in the OTT world, be it a Pluto or a Tubi or a Fubo, for example, We've been doing that for ages, and it's something that a lot of the satellite companies are looking for us to help them with. So I guess this is very traditional to OTT. And interestingly enough, we've now been approached by people in the OTT world who want to take their streaming channel and deliver it to a broadcast, a traditional broadcast channel. And we've now engineered the solution to do that. So really a little bit full circle from traditional to OTT, and then OTT to traditional. So that's something we've been working with and providing solutions. I hope that helps. Nice.
You're muted, Chris.
And by the way, I pulled a rookie move. I was just going to say, Jonathan, because you couldn't read my lips, that that's something that people in syndication are obviously looking for.
Yes, indeed. I mean, there's actually more and more people coming out of the woodwork asking for these solutions. Didn't anticipate, but obviously, you know, a lot of these broadcasters and brands have been around for a long, long time. They're very good at being in the traditional space, but maybe not so good at progressing to OTT. So yeah, and delivering also into kind of traditional cable again seems to be a weird thing. So you never know. Everything's moving very fast, and it's kind of bi-directional. And you know, you've got to be in it to win it. And if we can engineer a solution, we will do.
Right, and it's that level, you know, again, of being nimble, because you know, John, you've got a very interesting set of tools for discovery and search for content. Passion verticals have always seemed to succeed well in the FAST space. So what is your vision for driving revenue and growing audience with FAST right now?
For one, I think search is a key part. Of course, it's harder for FAST versus AVOD, because obviously you have a guide to search from versus having, which is more real time, versus having an AVOD searchability content. But for us, it's really about just, you know, I think the quality of channels keeps going up. You know, now the standard is getting as close to broadcast as possible. And that's really given the harder standard between just having a playlist and trying to actually program a channel. I think that is really separating kind of the men from the boys, because it's easy to put together a playlist and stream that out. It's much harder to do bumpers, in and outs, graphic kits, which traditional broadcasts have been doing for years. And now the platforms would love to have more traditional looking channels as opposed to those playlists.
Yeah, it's interesting because, of course, you're, you know, looking at and you're very good at basically enabling revenue, you know, and creating a monetization pattern from sort of underused broadcast quality content. I mean, are you seeing an increase coming out of the pandemic in people viewing on all platforms, or is there still one or two that they're mostly sticking?
Well, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of great platforms out there that, you know, that are up and comers, that are trying to get into the space. But still, there's, you know, a handful. You know, Chicken Soup is doing a good job at aggregating, you know, acquiring a number of companies to make a great, well-rounded product. Mainly because they had to, you know, when they want to compete with Pluto, Tubi, Samsung, Roku channel, those bigger companies. And I think regretfully, it's still hard if you have a channel on a smaller platform. Money. Still regretfully, 5 to 10 platforms globally really matter, which is like cable always, right? It kind of just settles down to about a handful to get your content into.
But it's interesting, Larry, because and you know, again, John alluded to this. Of course, the Redbox acquisition is a good thing for your business, but you already have a really solid lineup, and you know, it's some of your originals like The Wall and A Life in 10 Pictures are getting, you know, great reviews. I mean, you know, it's kind of interesting because, I mean, you're in this interesting space where people increasingly have known about you. I mean, I remember when Crackle was Grouper a million years ago, Sony Grouper. So you're kind of like you are all OG, but I think the Oest of the OG is Mr. Baird. So you know, I mean, what does this new growth phase mean for you, particularly in terms of your content libraries? Are more producers coming to you, for example, because of this increased heft that you have?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you see, like John's talking about, the culmination of this years-long strategy of putting all these pieces together. So we have this huge content library from Screen Media, now also from 1091, which has really great depth in categories, whether it's sort of extreme sports or paranormal. So there's just so much library content that we can still do a lot more with, whether it's on FAST or our O&O apps and channels. So just starting to really see all that come together. And yeah, with partners in particular, in terms of getting fast distribution, they're all always looking for ways to differentiate. So we don't just look like another Tubi or Pluto or Roku offering kind of the same bundle of content. So for us, whether it's exclusives like a lot of the BBC content that we were able to acquire with the Sherlock and BBC deal last spring, or our own originals, those have really helped, I think, make a difference in terms of working with partners, both editorially, getting them to cover the O&O channels, but also securing coverage for FAST. So I think for us, that will continue to be an important leg of the stool.
And that really says it all. Thank you for mentioning the BBC deal, because I believe that Crackle Plus is the only place to see Sherlock free, without paying something. Am I right?
That is 100% correct. So, as it came off of Netflix, it was one of their top performing shows for years globally. I think it even beat Friends. And we were able to negotiate a deal that I think probably surprised a lot of people. It took quite some time. If anyone's ever tried to work with the BBC, amazing organization, amazing content, but it definitely takes time to get anything done. So we were able to get that deal done, and we're still bringing in thousands of hours of content as part of that. So shows like Sherlock and Ripper Street and Corner were kind of the original tentpoles, but now we're building that out. We've got a huge volume of Royals, British content. Now we're getting a lot more dramas, period pieces, home and garden and lifestyle. So it's just that whole category or content pillar for us is incredibly exciting. And again, I think that's an example as well where I think there's a lot more opportunity for us, specifically with FAST channel. So we're looking and talking with partners, for instance, about a dedicated Royals FAST channel. And we just saw some success with that, on the unfortunate death of the Queen. A couple of weeks ago, we programmed our Chicken Soup for the Soul FAST channel across all our networks and saw a huge, uptick in usage and consumption over, the next 2 weeks. So again, it's an example of how that kind of hyper targeting that you can do with those channels can really work if you've got the right content library and audience targeting in place.
100%. Well, that is, and we'll get into talking about micro channels a bit. But Richard, I mean, you've got a pretty huge library of global shows. And by the way, that Tom Daly show seems to be doing well for you. But how has FAST changed your business overall? Over the last 5 years.
So I think Little Dot have obviously been doing a lot of work across lots of digital platforms. So you mentioned the Tom Daly series, the Snap series that our creative team are producing. And we've invested and really pushed into digital from an early stage. For us, I think FAST is an extension of that. We've got some great relationships with our partners. We either manage their IP and their content on those platforms directly, or we license, and we've now licensed we've got about sort of 20,000 plus programs, shows that we've licensed across our network. And the good thing about having that was that we've got a very smart and effective way of understanding what content's working with different audiences. So when we lent into the FAST space, we could leverage that, understand what was working, but also leverage relationships we had with the various producers, distributors, and that we work with. The differences, I think John, Larry, and Jonathan have all alluded, is the ecosystem and what you need to do to work in the fast space is different. There's certain things that we've had to invest in as a team. We schedule actively our channels. It's not just about playlists. We've got a creative team creating the graphics. We've got teams creating the promos. So there's a lot about the management of that, the distribution, and also the ad tech on the other side as well, to make sure that we can effectively monetize across all the platforms and territories that we're now on with we've got circa seven channels on about 12 platforms.
Yeah, and what do you see in terms of differing OTT consumption patterns between Europe and the US, mobile versus TV? I mean, what view can you give us on that?
So maybe just jumping in, I think it's less about mobile versus TV. Almost, I think 95% of our viewing is TV, CTV, and that's where we're certainly seeing the uptake. We also syndicate, distribute a lot of AVOD as well, but outside of kind of platforms like YouTube, etc., we find that on the OTT platforms, it's fast that's driving most of the audiences. And then in terms of different territories, obviously the US is massive. For us, it's about 53% of our viewing, so it's really significant. The flip side is I just think the US is a more mature market. It started earlier, and I think eventually fast will be prevalent in all markets, and it will grow. It just depends on the market conditions, and it may take a bit longer. But I'm sort of fairly bullish, albeit US is by far a lot bigger than any other market at the moment.
Yeah,
Richard, I have a question for Richard actually on that. Do you think it's because of just having more over the air in Europe makes fast a little harder to catch up to, just because it's easier in the UK to watch 30 channels over the air versus here in the States? Do you think that's part of the?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. So certain markets, there's a kind of tradition of free-to-air viewing that you don't have in the US. The flip side is I think those worlds will all channels will be delivered over IP and via the cloud and will be streamed. And what you've got is a broadcast ecosystem that at some point will move that way. And then you've got, I guess, a bunch of digital first companies that are moving quite aggressively. And I think it's just the speed at which they'll do that. And what you can see in most markets is there was that middle of, basic cable channels that ultimately the likes of Skies, the Comcasts, those platforms would bundle. But those basic pay channels, I think, will get squeezed between, SVOD and premium on one side coming in. So I think you're right. Certain markets are certainly more complicated, but I see a world where that viewing will migrate over time. It just may take longer.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, that is an interesting point with respect to, free. I think that we've seen a slight decline in the US in, the number of premium SVOD subscriptions. And obviously, folks like HBO Max and Netflix have raised their prices. So suddenly the discovery of this amazing thing called free, maybe that's a good thing for all of you guys. But I also think that, I go back to what I was saying to John about passion verticals. Don't you think that, news junkies and particularly sports have always had a place on Fast? And Jonathan, you guys are seeing some good growth on that side. So, talk about what live means in Fast and where it's going to go from here.
Well, I think it's an obvious answer. I mean, live sports was always massive on all the traditional platforms that we know and that we've all grown up with. Now what we're seeing is, those broadcasters, whether it be, the sports brands or the leagues or whatever it may be all over the world, they're looking to find, broader audiences and looking to take their live licensed live content to a free audience. So we're seeing a number. I wouldn't say maybe it's not the top tier sports, because the Formula Ones and the NFLs, we know they are premium subscription services, but maybe the medium tier sports and the niche, what I would call niche sports, are really coming out of the woodwork now and looking for audience. And now that broadcasting, we call it broadcasting, has become a lot more cost effective. We're looking at a lot of these smaller leagues and teams and franchises are looking to go live. And we're seeing, we've got a number of, again, tier 2, tier 3 sports. One of the things is the grappling network in the United States, which is kind of wrestling and that type of thing. Golf Life is another one that's been on traditional TV for a long time. World Chase Tag, a brand new sport that you may or may not have seen, which is kind of parkour chasing each other around an arena on climbing frames, which is a bit strange, but it's massively popular here in the United Kingdom. In obviously in France, where kind of parkour came about, now into the US. We know that ESPN bought the live rights, BT bought the rights here in the UK. We're doing the fast channel, which isn't the live rights, but there's such a huge audience that people are looking. It's mainly kids and teenagers, so they may not have the money to pay for the premium version. So we put together the lives, sorry, not the non-live, with a number of other brands. We're doing live, which we call, we do a lot of VOD, but what we call it a live overlay. So our sports clients can have a tournament that starts at 5 p.m. and goes on till 7 o'clock in the evening, where they would schedule that free broadcast, and our system would look for an incoming live feed and switch to the live feed from 5 p.m. till the end, and then switch back to the VOD side. But something very easy for the sports guys to use, to switch in and out of, literally from a laptop at a sports ground. You don't have to have 50 people in an MCR to be able to facilitate what we call live sports these days. So we come up with a very cheap, economic way for these smaller tier sports to find an audience, essentially.
Yeah,
and that's a huge growth area for us.
So tag, you mean tag is going to be the next cool sport?
Next thing, man. It's the next thing.
All right, I want all of you to bid on two things. You listening? One, pickleball. Okay, right. Two, dodgeball. I want a dodgeball fast channel. That I definitely want, big time. Yeah. But this is live. I mean, again, in terms of where all this is going, I mean, I think it's important for our audience to know literally, and if you guys can, I'll just go around each of you. So how do you build fast channels for your audiences? I mean, let's start with you, Larry, since you're the Oest of the OG. I mean, without giving away any secrets, I mean, somebody comes to you and how do you build a fast channel? Just and try to be succinct.
I mean, it starts with the data, right? So we do have years, like you said, we have Crackle especially has been around quite a long time. And so, one of the first things we looked at, we look at different what we call content pillars and where people are organically attracted to our content and consuming lots and lots of content. And so that's an example where we came up with our classic TV fast channel. So again, it's really just data driven. So we look at, where are people consuming a lot of content? Is that an identifiable, distinct audience that we think is looking for content that's not necessarily easy to find all in one place, and that's really it. It's not super secret, but it's really based on that, and that's how we program our O&O apps, but it's also how we look at fast channel opportunities. Obviously, with new content coming in, it's a little slightly different, but even there, say with 1091 and all that paranormal content I mentioned earlier, we know from their past data that that content performs incredibly well. There's a huge audience. I know from my past lives that or same thing. So again, I think, and we talk to partners, right, about what's going to work on their platform with their audience. So it's kind of those three elements coming together.
Yeah, I mean, going back in time, I remember when you were just streaming on, let's say laptops, computers, and I was in Eric Berger's office one Friday when Steve Moskowitz called years ago, 2009. That's how OG I am. And Steve was on it. For those who don't know, Steve was head of Sony Pictures Television Entertainment. But it's interesting now because I mean, you can cross so many different fields quickly. And Richard, I'm sure you have the same story, but give us a flavor of how if somebody comes to you, you would roll up a fast.
So similar to Larry, we have a lot of data. Now we have a lot of data from Fast, but we have a huge volume of data across YouTube and other social platforms. So identifying the I think Fast for us, like most of the market, it's really about having a very clear proposition and a clear segment. So the kind of passion niches and audiences that you can build and then super serve. So that's really important. Actually, kind of basics like volume of content is really important. So for example, Larry was talking about royals. We run a real royalty channel on YouTube. We didn't have enough content to create a Fast channel, but we run that as blocks within our History Hit channel. And that does very well whenever there's kind of royal events. But you also have to be pragmatic and you have to know the volume. And that's why we aggregate across different distributors and producers, because then you can create enough content that is compelling enough and you want to be able to refresh it. I think then the other aspects are, the scheduling of that. It's not just, you have to think about that, learn from the data. You want to make the channel look as professional as possible, and you want to be able to promote content within the channel and also on the platforms. So engaging with the platforms is really crucial to kind of drive awareness of that content. And then in our ecosystem, some platforms will monetize and they're very effective at that, but particularly outside the US, we control a lot of inventory. So we've invested a lot in creating an ad stack and trying to lean into an area that is really new. You don't have all the answers, but step by step, seeing a path to monetization in all those kind of markets. So I think sort of echoing what's been said, but I think it's probably sort of everyone says, oh, it's dead easy and you can just do this really quickly. There's a lot in there. There's a lot of platform conversation. And there's a lot of work to be able to do that. And I would say it's potentially getting harder because everyone's now a lot more interested in that. At the same time, it's more exciting because I think the audiences are also coming. So lots of interesting things.
Yeah, and I think I go back to this four-letter word, free. I mean, when YouTube, and thank you, I think you were the first to mention YouTube in this conversation, but when even before YouTube, viral video being a thing, but that's the idea of where you might find content, particularly if somebody actually has the rights and is willing to distribute it, if you can cut a good deal. But it's interesting to me as well. I mean, do you find more media buyers coming to you during this pandemic, post-pandemic period? Are they looking to shift more to Fast? And that's really a question for all of you. I mean, John, is that something that you've seen? Have you entertained new conversations in the last couple of years with agency media buyers or others, or is it just exponential growth?
No, I think that's where you have to focus on if you want to get a higher CPM. One of the challenges really is now if you have to put the cost and effort into creating a high quality channel, you also have now to make sure you get enough revenue to cover those costs because it requires more staff, requires better technology and better delivery. So obviously, it helps having a better distribution and better quality programming. Like Richard said, now as people are flipping through the channels, they're going to recognize, with something they feel has that television experience, And I always think it's kind of ironic because, I always have brands. I have two daughters, 24 and 19, and companies like Sling, and, they're saying, hey, got this new cable package that's low cost for young people. And the reality is it's been free for them their whole life. I paid $200 a month for 10 years for cable. They had free with ads their whole life. So now to watch Fast for them, it's just the same programming. It's just when the TV ads come on, regretfully, they look at their phone. But at least it's being tracked per ad versus broadcast, where you don't have that direct response.
It's amazing, right? You had to kind of go full circle to get a better mousetrap for what we grew up with, because we're all of a certain age. Yes, I mean that was Jonathan. You're in this interesting position with your technology, where I mean you guys can roll something up pretty quickly. But I think that, you're also seeing rights holders who are coming to you who would never have considered Fast. They probably didn't know what it was a year or two ago. And now they're learning, back to what John's saying, that there's an audience out there for their bloody content if it's properly positioned.
Yeah. And how do I do it? Right? How do I achieve this? So there's, again, it's trying to work through what is Fast, educate people on what it is and how you can generate money. It is, as Richard said, it's a lot about distribution, getting onto the more highly trafficked, popular platforms. CTV is definitely a big growth area with Samsung TV Plus. But I think the key here is, on our side of the fence, is to try and make it as quick and easy as we can for content owners, broadcasters, to be able to spin up a channel, a really good quality channel, but to do it fast and easily. We do it in quite literally under a week. We can plug into wherever your content sits, so wherever the CMS or however they keep their content, plugging into that and trying to really actually automate that process to onboard. The second part is quality control, making sure that everything looks really, really good. We have an automated process that actually hunts through the content to 50, 60, 70 different features, or it checks the content. And then we have a human quality control that does the last piece. So that takes 24 hours just to do that process. Some other companies take 2 weeks to a month to do that.
It's incredible.
We've automated that, and that's again coming from a more of an engineering side of the business, to try and just make the go-to-market process much easier, and maybe to take some of the difficulty out of it.
I mean, that's an incredible, when we think of provisioning channels. I mean, yes, I mean, people have been making claims on social media, and that's sort of my next question. But to create a professional, fast channel with only a 24-hour QC, to have that kind of distribution, particularly on a CTV platform, is just amazing. Larry, since you guys have been around so long, you've got an interesting view of the social media landscape. I mean, do you find yourselves competing? And that's really a question for all of you, but I'll start with you, Larry. Do you find yourself competing in any way with influencers, with, dare I say, the MCN world, which doesn't really exist so much anymore? But so talk about that dynamic.
Yeah, I don't know if we see it so much as competing with influencers, but I do think, we look at ways to see if we can authentically engage in those conversations that are already happening, and then raise awareness with people that are the influencers in that space, that we have some of the content that, people that follow them or that are interested in what they have to say would want to find out about. So that's something we're doing right now, for instance, in partnership with Den of Geek for the last few months, because we have such a deep content library. And so you might think off the top of your head, well, how does that work with Den of Geek? You guys don't have Marvel or Disney or any of those big titles, but because we have whether it's some of the deep British content or just other Crackle library, SMV, 1091 content library content, we're able to, do a monthly feature with them now to really highlight, whether it's across our classic TV pillar or British. This month we're doing horror. And so again, I think those are the areas we're looking to go deeper and deeper in and find those kind of partnerships, whether it's, a publication like that or an actual, individual influencer that can help raise awareness for, the depth of the library, because we can't possibly advertise all of that on CTV or even on search, reach everyone that might be looking for those titles. And so we're, trying to get innovative about, how we make sure we're part of those conversations.
Right. And Richard, how does that dynamic affect what you guys do at Little Dot Studio?
I think we see that as complementary. So I think you have to kind of, so in the same way as YouTube's now very different to vertical platforms, the content creation for that, editing and also exploitation is very different. I think you have to understand that those are different platforms, and that ultimately I think they're fairly complementary. Interesting is if more people spend time on search, does that take away from, for example, my gut feel is they're kind of different ecosystems, and even with shorts, we think actually that's quite a good way to signpost into longer form content, promote out. We've got an app and we're using that to kind of promote into that with, again, very targeted messaging around, this is some great little content here, find out more, or you can access more of that content. So I think, they're kind of different behaviors. And so you definitely have to treat how you exploit them very differently and have the expertise to do that. The flip side is I think there can be a kind of complementary ecosystem, and I just don't worry in the same ways I think actually SVOD's good for fast. I kind of think the fact that more and more people are engaging with good content, however that content is, I think overall just creates opportunities. It's just finding.
Yeah, and John, I mean, I would think that the same is true for you, particularly with respect to your sort of search and discovery technology.
Well, it definitely helps having, like you talk about those niche channels. Now you have the opportunity to now have a whole crew of essentially hosts that focus on horror, focus on a certain type of category they really like, and now they've become kind of the new next generation of hopefully eventually, I think, live hosts. I think the influencers today are getting more of your live hosts for these fast channels, for in and outs, interstitials, introducing content. It's hard for let's say Pluto to say, hey, watch Nightmare on Elm Street on our horror channel, because I can just go to on demand and watch it over here. So why would I go to the channel? But they want you to watch the channel because it has a longer, multiple hour viewing session time versus on demand. So I think, you can use those influencers to say, who does maybe reviews of horror shows, to have a live show on Pluto at 2:00 to talk about a few horror shows. And then from there, they can now lead in those horror shows into the channel. So I think those are going to be our future hosts.
I can see that, completely, where you can offer some live, interactions as well, whether it's some gaming, some kind of prize giveaway or whatever. Go back to early days of live television. I mean, going back to the future, I think is really interesting. And Jonathan, I mean, I think you guys, certainly have the tech stack to do some of these things, but I mean, in some ways, I think that these niche channels, it would offer you the ability to almost counter program against SVOD in a way.
Yeah, and also I think there's, we're doing a lot of these almost like prototyping where, companies or production companies, broadcasters do have really, really good content. And in order for us to prove this is a viable option for them, or even put together a prototype channel. So when I say prototype, instead of giving us 150 hours, maybe send 24 hours worth of programming, we could spin up almost like a test fast, which could be, then they can then show it to their board and say, this is what it kind of looks like. We can deliver it into YouTube. We can do all sorts of fun things to make it a lot lighter lift in order for these companies to make smarter decisions without it costing $1 million.
Yeah, yeah, and I can see where that goes. I mean, and I think that the niche content, certainly happens here. But one of the things that I think is interesting, I mean, because CTV seems to be such a big driver. I mean, do you see mobile becoming a bigger player, or is that just going to be region by region? I mean, what are you looking at, Larry? That's all right. He didn't hear me.
I did not. Can you repeat that?
No, I was just saying, I mean, is CTV, will mobile become a bigger part of the landscape here? Because we've been talking a lot, all of us, about
CTV
CTV.
versus mobile. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's I think Richard was saying earlier, or maybe it was Jonathan, I mean, the vast majority of our viewers are still watching on connected televisions. However, we are seeing a surprising number of people still coming in on the web, coming in on their phones. And so I really view that as kind of your first point of entry, right? So you've got this thing in your hand all day, every day. It's a lot of times the first place you go to look to see where a show might be available. And so we see that in our data where people are discovering the shows that we have. We have a pretty aggressive, search strategy, whether it's across YouTube, or Google, to make sure that our content does show up in those instances, whether it's organically or even paid, if it makes economic sense. And so again, whether it's social or search, there's lots of discovery still happening on mobile, even if those people don't necessarily watch. I will say though, we do see shows where we get a surprising, sometimes we get some surprises, and we are seeing kind of some general growth trends across mobile. So I do think more and more, as audiences are younger, as phones get bigger, that we are seeing increased watch times. But I don't see it cannibalizing, long-term CTV.
No, I don't. But yet it's interesting because like MeTV has gotten a lot of buzz for. They've been promoting like crazy all over the place, but not so. I mean, they're really a CTV, play, and yet you see a lot, getting pushed around all kinds of social media. I mean, here's a question for all of you: is there a premium advertiser that's come to you in during the pandemic that's made you think, wow, things are really changing now? John, has that been the case for you?
Well, we launched an Hispanic app here in September, and we were surprised in how much Verizon really got aggressively into it and was really looking to try to reach mobile audiences with apps and so on. And they were wanting to take a chance on a new app that had just launched just to reach a certain demographic. So I was really, of course, obviously they have Verizon Digital, so they understand the technical side of this, but it was just nice to see more of the consumer-facing marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, and Richard, how about you? Have you seen anyone in your sphere who's more of a premium advertiser, or even one that's sort of a challenger brand?
So where we control the inventory and we're monetizing, and we monetize we're a range of partners, we're, I think, already getting premier brands in. So we're achieving TV CPMs, certainly in the UK and some of those other markets. And that's partly because we're pitching ourselves as a kind of premium proposition, and it's a kind of premium experience in terms of the advertising. We even hand stitch our breaks in because we just think that's far better than an automated experience. So we're already seeing, and we're seeing big consumer brands advertising across the channels. The anecdotes we're getting is it's very effective. Our audiences are obviously skewed to the TV market and getting, say, a 16 to 34 audience, then we're delivering a lot on that. And there seems to be a better conversion to sales for those products. So, I think it takes time because it's in the UK, it's not at scale. But we're seeing more and more money coming into CTV, and then as I think we've got in the US, there becomes a threshold effect when just the scale moves to the market, and then it becomes, I think, quite compelling. So I think it's CTV and fast is premium already.
Yeah. And Jonathan, what's your take on that?
I'm only listening to our ad partners and the people in the buying business. There's a massive interest in CTV inventory. It seems to be the hot potato of the moment. They don't seem to be interested in anything else. So that's what I'm hearing on the jungle drums across 10, 15 companies that we spoke to in this side of the business. It's all CTV.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, of course, that ensures the viability of that TV set, and of course, Samsung, has all sides of that right now. But Roku, who we haven't talked an awful lot about, but I mean, they've become a bit more of a competitor, if you will, with Roku Originals, and of course, they acquired a good part of Quibi. Quibi. By the way, who here subscribed to Quibi? Anyone?
Yeah.
No. I subscribed to CNN Go, so that was what, 2 days? Was it 3 days? Anyway.
Yeah, it didn't last very long.
Yeah, tough loss there. But that's I mean, we get to a point now where we're seeing that's hard to compete with Fast. But if you're AMC Plus, like they have a $2.99 play. And you would think that would do well. And I haven't seen the numbers. We'll have to talk to Courtney Tomasmo about that. But I mean, it's an interesting thing seeing that Pluto acquired by Viacom, Xumo, Comcast, Tubi, Fox. I mean, the big broadcasters have bought into this. What's your take? And you can, sort of defer this. But has that just made it easier for you guys to do what you do?
That's a good question. I mean, I think there's just going to be more. There's going to be more of these mergers and acquisitions as we move forwards. There's going to be more niche plays pop out of the woodwork. I just think this is a massive growth area. I'm not sure which way it's going to go. Obviously, the big boys are always going to control a good segment of the market, but there's still space for really good content in the niche universe that may surprise us. So kind of watch this space.
Well, and I like the way you're teasing that, because I'm guessing you've got some cards up your sleeve there, and I think all of you do. So maybe I can tease that. Larry, what's your next big hit for 2023? What should we be looking for from Crackle Plus?
Yeah, so I mean, we do have a slate of originals coming up this quarter. So we're launching Wedding Talk with Tara Lipinski this week, in fact, on Thursday.
Is Johnny Weir going to be on that too?
Johnny Weir is not on this season. Maybe we'll pick him up for season 2.
You got to work on that. Yeah.
Exactly. And then we're in our 3rd season of Going From Broke, which is produced with Ashton Kutcher and the CEO of Chegg Life, Dan Rosenzweig. That will be launching November 10th. And again, these are all also good shows that are good examples of sponsor integration. So you're talking about, do we see big sponsors coming in? And yeah, I mean, again, the more you see people going into SVOD, it's only really creating more demand for what it is that we're doing, and finding a place to replace that traditional audience reach for advertisers online in the new world. And so we're seeing with sponsors in particular for integrated sponsorships that then also include media buy, that's really powerful and compelling element. So DoorDash was a big sponsor for Going From Broke season 3. So we did a push with them, even doing a catch up on season 2 that went live in September, kind of priming the pump for season 3 coming in November. And
Brilliant.
And then last but not least, we have our 2nd season of Inside the Black Box coming in December. We have a full integration with the General Insurance with Shaq. So again, it's just we're seeing more and more of that. The sponsors are looking for ways to break through the clutter, reach these audiences online in ways they can't reach them anymore in traditional terrestrial media, and in kind of innovative ways that you can't reach them in any other way. So I think, I see nothing but growth for us in the next few years in these areas. So I think it's an exciting time, like Jonathan and everyone else has.
Yeah. It's interesting because, we talked there was a good run there for about 6 or 7 years where the new fronts were all about the MCNs, wither them. But I mean, the likes of all of you in the fast space have seemed to supplant that. Richard, tell us what Little Dot Studios has coming up for 2023. What should we tune our CTV eyeballs to?
So Little Dot Studios is obviously a lot bigger than our little world within that, but that means that we've got opportunities. So what we'll be focusing on is getting more great content into our existing channels. We've got our fantastic content acquisition team at MIP, and we're kind of continuing to seek to get even more rights and stronger rights to strengthen those propositions. We are also working on some new channel concepts. We're sort of extending over to the part of our business that manages directly some of the IP. The rights positions are far more complicated, less straightforward, but we think there's some great ideas. And again, it's about finding the right concept that we think will work, and then developing that. So we're not going to launch another 7 channels, but we've got a couple that we're sort of potentially looking at. And then probably, we're on most of the big platforms. We've been sort of extending that out. We just launched a bunch of territories with LG over the last couple of weeks. So there may be a few more kind of select partners there, and then a lot on the advertising space. So
that's great. And is that the LG Ads group, you mean?
LG Ads are obviously buying, so they're on the ad side. So that's one part, and then LG, as in the CTV, the platform. So
yes,
it's another great partner to be.
Great. And John Wells, what are you looking for at MIPCOM?
Well, probably more fight content for Fight 24/7 for Triller, to focus on that. But for the new year, we're going to just try to get it to as close to broadcast as we can. Start getting some more live content in there. We're going to do some testing here in the new year with, obviously we're dealing with a partner who deals with pay-per-view and premium events. We're going to try to be doing more like, weigh-ins, the day before, early cards on the fight, behind the scenes, step and repeats, and find ways to just bring in some live into those channels and just slowly just try to get them as close to broadcast as we can by the end of next year.
That seems to be a really, really good hook, I would think, because you're bringing, again, that behind the scenes that, I mean, okay, fine. Somebody might have Facebook Watch or use, Snap or something, but I think that's a really smart strategy. And from a monetization and advertising point of view, I think, that's a no-brainer too, right?
And exactly, and a strange concept here is because we're dealing with a pay-per-view event that we don't have, is we're actually using FAST on your mobile for a second screen. So we want you to watch the pay-per-view event on your big screen TV and then stream the live interviews and stuff behind the scene on your phone. So we're actually kind of leaning into the mobile side.
But that's it. That's what we do. That's what we do with live. We hate watch or whatever we do, or we get snarky on Twitter during Eurovision Song Contest. By the way, give that wolf a banana. I want to buy. Somebody's got to have a T-shirt. That song was awesome, man. But anyway, and by the way, for those who don't know, it's going to be in Liverpool next year. Liverpool will be the home of Eurovision Song Contest 2023. So don't all cheer at once. But Jonathan French, what are you looking for at MIPCOM?
We're just looking to expand our business. We're working with some bigger studios, with some broadcasters, some European telcos that are interested in licensing our technology, building the business, just open offices in Asia and Australia, and building a presence in Europe. So it's very strategic for us to be at MIPCOM for obvious reasons. So lots of growth going on.
Yeah, you're getting it from all sides. And this is our time to take some questions. We do have a few here. And thank you. Larry Baird, man, he just answered Rory Corbett's question with Den of Geek. Really responsive. Larry, you're just on the ball. You must be in marketing. But hey, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Cédric Monnier, my buddy from OCAST, asked, question for everybody, for tout le monde. How do you handle rights for content to use in a FAST channel? Which is a great question. Are you ruling under AVOD or free TV or anything else? It's quite a gray zone from the content owner's perspective. Everyone gets that. So, Larry, we'll go to you first to answer Cedric.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the contract. So we have, quite a few that go back quite some time. We definitely distinguish more, I would say, between AVOD, FAST. Those rights can vary. Even sometimes YouTube gets carved out. So it really just depends. But those are things we go through with every single contract in terms of what's available. Obviously, we want to have content available in as many ways and places as we can get it. But, we realize not everyone has all of those rights at all times. So we definitely look at each of those areas.
Great answer. And Richard, how about you? How would you answer?
I think, from our perspective, where we can, we'd like to take as many rights as possible. So the broader definition around AVOD is very useful because, pragmatically, that means we can take one file, process it, and then push it out over multiple platforms. And that's a lot more efficient to do that. But we understand that, I think some distributors need to separate out that right, and we can look at that. I think that where you can exploit that over multiple territories and multiple platforms, it just makes life a lot easier because, on the economics perspective, you don't want to get to a place where you have to run separate feeds for every single territory for every. So that's the only thing that I think is a natural balance that we try to navigate with our partners.
Great answer. And John Wells, how about you, sir?
I think, they have a slightly different perspective because obviously they're looking at in terms of the cost of onboarding content. And therefore, if you're interested in that cost, you want to make sure you can defer it across as many places as possible. And if you are investing in your library, I agree with that. But the advantages, I think, is let's say, for example, I have my content on Pluto as an on-demand deal. That same content could be on 4 different FAST channels, just like when you used to flip to the channel, you'd see Cops or Simpsons on multiple syndication. Same kind of idea here is I think the rights are a lot more open in terms of not conflicting with your broadcast rights and not conflicting with your on-demand rights by at the very least allowing as a producer your content in various FAST channels, but only if it's available in the stream and not on demand. Because if you're controlling that yourself, so you don't have to feel like you already have a Pluto deal that you can't put yourself on Tastemade because it's on Pluto. You still could if you want to carve that out. But of course, obviously it's the rights issues. But we find that those rights are a little bit more actually gray and a little easier to work around than trying to give all the rights.
It's a great answer. And Jonathan, how would you answer Cedric on that?
Well, the bottom line is right now on the digital rights side of things, we actually API with a couple of existing DRM companies. So we don't handle that per se, but we do manage that through third parties. So that's my answer to that.
Great answers. And for those who are new to FAST, I think you've given really a very tightly rolled masterclass here. Again, I want to thank everybody. This is really a great pre-MIPCOM event for those who are going to Cannes next week. Please meet up with Larry Baird, who is a VP of Marketing at Crackle Plus, Richard Young, Director of Syndication at Little Dot Studios, John Wells, CEO of Dooya Media Studios, and Jonathan French, Senior Vice President of Sales and Business Development at MuxIP.